HOA demolished my house while I was gone. Then a judge ordered them to pay me $10 million. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, we would like to ask you for one small favor. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you will not miss any of our latest videos. It only takes a moment, costs nothing, and is one of the best ways to help us continue creating powerful, emotional, and dramatic stories like this one. Your support means more to us than you can imagine. Also, let us know where you are watching from today. Share your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Now, let us return to our main character. Mr. Mitchell, the deputy said, staring at the empty foundation. Are you absolutely sure there was a house here when you left? I didn't answer immediately. I still had my airport bag hanging from one shoulder, and the metal zipper kept tapping against my hip in the wind. 8 days earlier, I had locked the front door, checked the kitchen faucet, and shut down the breaker feeding my father's workshop. Now there was no door, no kitchen, no workshop, just a wide rectangle of broken concrete, twisted copper wire, and pale insulation scattered across 6 acres of red Georgia clay. The air smelled like diesel exhaust, wet plaster, and the sharp chemical bite of hydraulic fluid. A yellow excavator sat near the tree line with its bucket lowered into the dirt. Mud covered the tracks. Splinters of painted wood were caught between the steel teeth. I recognized the color immediately. Forest green. My father had painted the porch railing that shade every spring for 27 years. My name is Ryan Mitchell. I'm 43 years old, a structural engineer, and until that morning, I believed even corrupt people were afraid of destroying something they could never replace. I was wrong. I stepped over a cracked section of foundation and saw the only object left standing near the center of the ruins. My father's steel safe. It was waist-high, blackened by heat, and tipped slightly to one side where the floor beneath it had collapsed. The door was dented. One hinge had been cut clean through. Someone had tried to open it before the excavator finished the job. Gravel crunched behind me. A white Cadillac Escalade rolled through the opening where my gate had been. Lauren Whitaker stepped out wearing cream-colored trousers, spotless boots, and a white hard hat with the Brookstone Hills HOA logo printed across the front. Lauren had been HOA president for 5 years. She was 52, always perfectly dressed, and famous for using a soft voice when she wanted people to feel small. Her perfume reached me before she did, sweet and expensive, floating over the dust like it belonged there. "Ryan," she said, removing her sunglasses. "I'm sorry you had to come home to this." I looked at the safe. "You mean the house you demolished?" Her mouth tightened for half a second. Then the smile returned. "The association acted under emergency authority. My property is outside the HOA. Your structure posed a danger to neighboring residents." I almost laughed. I had inspected every load-bearing wall 6 weeks earlier. The foundation had less settlement than houses built last year. The wiring was updated. The roof could handle hurricane-force winds. Lauren knew that because I had sent her the engineering report after her first complaint. I stepped closer. "Show me the demolition permit." She opened a leather folder and handed me 4 pages stamped with what looked like the county seal. Emergency structural abatement. Imminent collapse. Immediate removal authorized. The language was polished. The formatting looked official. But the permit number belonged to a retaining wall inspection I had completed 3 years earlier. Someone had copied it from a public county record. Lauren watched my eyes move across the page. "Everything was properly approved," she said. Then she handed me a second envelope. Inside was an invoice for $97,000. Demolition labor, hazardous material disposal, administrative enforcement costs. At the bottom, bold letters warned that failure to pay within 30 days would cause the HOA to record a lien against my land. They had destroyed my home. Now they wanted me to fund the theft. A gust of wind lifted concrete dust between us. That was when I noticed fresh orange survey paint cutting across the empty foundation toward the woods behind Brookstone Hills. A straight line, wide enough for a private road. Lauren followed my gaze and slowly closed the folder. "This can still be resolved without becoming unpleasant," she said. I looked toward the pines at the northern edge of my property. Hidden beneath a cedar branch was a trail camera I had installed after contractors started measuring my driveway without permission. I had replaced its batteries the morning before my flight. Lauren believed the excavator had erased the evidence. She didn't know the camera had watched her crew break the gate, enter the workshop, and drag my father's safe into the open before they brought down the first wall. I folded the invoice and slipped it into my coat. "You're right," I said. "This won't become unpleasant." Then I smiled, because Lauren Whitaker thought she had left me with nothing. What she had really left me was a forged permit, a $97,000 confession, and 8 days of evidence waiting in the trees. Before Lauren Whitaker turned my home into a demolition site, it had survived 3 generations of Mitchells, 2 hurricanes, a kitchen fire, and my father's belief that anything built correctly deserved to be repaired instead of replaced. My grandfather, Henry Mitchell, bought the 6 acres in 1956. Back then, Brookstone Hills did not exist. There were only pine trees, red clay, and a narrow county road that disappeared into darkness after sunset. Granddad worked at a textile mill during the week and built the house on weekends. He poured the foundation himself, framed the walls with timber from the property, and traded engine repairs for help installing the roof. The first house had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a porch that creaked whenever rain moved in from the west. My grandmother called it a warning system. Granddad called it craftsmanship. The house grew as the family did. He added a bedroom when my father was born. Dad built the workshop after finishing trade school. My mother planted 2 dogwood trees beside the driveway when I was 6 because she said every home needed something beautiful that did not require permission. Most people saw faded siding, mismatched windows, and a roofline designed before neighborhood committees existed. I saw our history written in wood and stone. The cut beside the pantry door came from my first attempt to carry lumber through the kitchen. The burn mark on the workshop floor was where Dad dropped a welding torch and kicked it into a bucket before my mother noticed. That workshop made me an engineer. Dad repaired farm equipment, rebuilt engines, and fixed anything neighbors dragged onto our driveway. He taught me that structures failed long before they collapsed. "You watch the small movement," he used to say, pressing 2 fingers against a cracked beam. "That is where the truth starts." I watched. By 17, I could calculate roof loads, frame a wall, and recognize foundation movement from the sound of a closing door. At 29, I earned my structural engineering license. Dad celebrated by pretending he had expected it. Then he framed my first approved blueprint and hung it above his workbench. Cancer took him 11 years later. The deed arrived from his attorney inside a plain brown envelope. Behind it was a handwritten note: "Keep the house. Someone will eventually want the road beneath it." I thought he meant developers in general. He meant Lauren. Brookstone Hills expanded around us slowly. Matching stone mailboxes appeared first. Then artificial ponds, iron gates, and houses large enough to have rooms nobody entered. Our parcel remained outside the HOA boundary. Dad had rejected every annexation proposal, including 4 signed by Lauren. She first visited me 3 months after his funeral. Her heels clicked across the porch my grandfather had built. She studied the house, the workshop, and the narrow strip connecting my land to the county road. "Brookstone is entering a new chapter," she said. I looked through the dusty workshop window at Dad's framed blueprint. "This property already has one." Lauren smiled. At the time, I believed she had come to make another purchase offer. I did not understand that she had already decided my answer no longer mattered. Lauren returned the following Thursday with a survey map, a purchase contract, and a man named Grant Holloway. Grant introduced himself as a regional planning consultant. His polished shoes, silver watch, and habit of measuring my driveway with his eyes told me he was something else. Lauren spread the map across the porch railing. A thick red line began at the county road, crossed my front yard, cut through the workshop, and continued into 300 acres behind Brookstone Hills. My house appeared as a gray rectangle labeled clearance zone. I tapped it with 1 finger. "You drew a road through my kitchen." Grant adjusted his tie. It would be a controlled emergency access corridor. It would be asphalt. It would improve response times for fire and medical services. To houses that have not been built? Lauren's smile tightened. The map showed 64 luxury homes, a clubhouse, and a private lake surrounded by walking trails. What it did not emphasize was the protected wetland blocking every other route to the county road. Without my land, the developer needed a bridge, federal permits, and years of environmental review. With my land, construction could begin before winter. Lauren offered me $600,000. It sounded impressive until Grant mentioned, by accident, that the completed project was valued at more than $80 million. You are not buying a house, I said. You are buying the only road around the wetland. Lauren folded her hands. We are offering far above the value of an aging structure. The structure is not for sale. Her eyes shifted toward the workshop. Sentiment can become expensive, Ryan. So can trespassing. Grant looked away. Lauren did not. The first violation notice arrived 4 days later. Peeling paint on the rear siding. The second accused my workshop of producing industrial noise, although I had not used a power tool in weeks. The third demanded removal of my work truck because commercial vehicles were supposedly prohibited. Each notice carried fines, deadlines, and the Brookstone Hills seal. Each ignored the same fact. My parcel was not part of the HOA. I answered every letter with copies of the deed, county plat, and my father's rejected annexation agreements. Lauren responded by sending more. Then contractors began appearing near my boundary. They photographed the drainage ditch, measured the road frontage, hammered orange survey stakes into the red clay until I pulled them out and stacked them beside the mailbox. One evening, I found Grant behind the workshop holding a laser measuring tool. You are on private property, I said. He lowered it slowly. Lauren said preliminary access was approved. Approved by whom? He glanced toward the road. Lauren's Escalade sat beneath the dogwood trees with its engine running. She watched us through the windshield. The next morning, a certified envelope arrived. It ordered me to attend an emergency HOA hearing concerning structural hazards on my property. The hearing date was printed at the top. It had taken place 3 nights earlier. According to the attached minutes, I had failed to appear, waived my right to object, and allowed immediate enforcement. 4 board members had supposedly voted. 1 had resigned months earlier. 2 were vacationing in Europe. At the bottom of the final page, beneath Lauren's signature, 1 sentence appeared in bold. Emergency demolition may proceed without further notice. That was when I understood the letters were never meant to convince me. Lauren was building a paper trail, not to purchase my home, to make its destruction look authorized. The engineer's report arrived 2 days later. It was 12 pages long, stamped with the county seal, and signed by a man named Charles Benton, P. According to the report, my foundation had shifted nearly 5 inches. The wiring was supposedly exposed in multiple rooms. The workshop roof had been declared unstable enough to collapse under ordinary wind. Every claim was false. I knew because I had inspected the house myself 6 weeks earlier. The photographs were false too. One showed a cracked basement wall. My house did not have a basement. Another showed burned wiring beneath a breaker panel painted bright blue. Mine was gray. I searched the state licensing database. No structural engineer named Charles Benton had ever been licensed in Georgia. The phone number listed beneath his signature connected to a prepaid voicemail account. The office address belonged to a shipping store beside a nail salon. Lauren had not hired an engineer. She had invented one. I called the county building department and reached an inspector named David Monroe. His keyboard clicked steadily while I gave him the parcel number. Then the clicking stopped. There is no condemnation order for that address, he said. What about an emergency demolition permit? Nothing issued through this department. I looked at the seal printed across Lauren's paperwork. Someone copied your letterhead. The line went silent. Email me every page, David said. I sent the report, the fake meeting minutes, and the violation notices. 27 minutes later, he called back. That permit number belongs to a restaurant renovation from 2022. So the demolition order is fraudulent. That document did not come from our office, he said. I'm referring it for investigation. Lauren called before sunset. Her voice was smooth, but I could hear papers moving quickly in the background. I understand you contacted the county. I understand you fabricated an engineer. That is a defamatory accusation. So is declaring a safe house dangerous. The association has an obligation to protect Brookstone residents. My property is outside Brookstone. Your property affects Brookstone. That does not give you ownership. She paused. Then the sweetness disappeared. You were given a reasonable opportunity to cooperate, Ryan. There it was. Not public safety. Not emergency access. Punishment for refusing to sell. I told her that any contractor entering my land would be reported for criminal trespass. Then I sent written notices to the sheriff, the county, the HOA board, Grant Holloway, and every demolition company operating within 60 miles. I also installed 2 visible security cameras. The old trail camera remained hidden beneath the cedar branch near the pines. For days later, my firm assigned me to inspect a damaged convention center garage in Chicago. The job required 8 days on site. I considered refusing. David told me the county had opened a formal forgery investigation. They would be reckless to touch your property now, he said. Before leaving, I photographed every wall, beam, outlet, window, and foundation joint. I uploaded the images to 3 separate accounts and gave copies of the deed to my neighbor, Samuel Price. Samuel was 66, a retired sheriff's deputy, and deeply suspicious of anyone carrying authority without proof. I'll watch the place, he said. On the 7th morning, my phone rang while I stood beneath a fractured concrete deck. Samuel was breathing hard. Diesel engines roared behind him. Ryan, he said, there are excavators inside your gate. A metallic crash exploded through the speaker. Then Lauren's voice rose above the machinery. Open the workshop first. Get the safe out before you bring down the walls. The call cut off. 900 miles away, I heard steel tear through the roof my father had built. I booked the first flight home before Samuel called back. By the time I reached Brookstone Hills, the afternoon sun had turned the dust above my property copper red. Samuel stood beside the broken gate with blood drying along his cheek and mud across one sleeve. They shoved me down, he said. Private security. Lauren told them I was interfering with an emergency operation. I looked past him. The house was gone. Not damaged. Not partially collapsed. Gone. The kitchen, bedrooms, porch, and every wall my grandfather had framed by hand had been crushed into a field of broken concrete, twisted wiring, and splintered lumber. The workshop was a black rectangle in the red clay. Dad's tools had been thrown into dumpsters with insulation, shingles, and pieces of furniture. A yellow excavator idled near the foundation. Its engine pulsed through the soles of my shoes. My father's steel safe stood in the center of the ruins, blackened and dented, with one hinge cut through and scrape marks around the lock. They had tried to open it before pulling it outside. Lauren stood beside the machine wearing a white hard hat and holding a clipboard. She looked like she was supervising a landscaping project. I called the sheriff. Deputy Michael Torres arrived 20 minutes later, photographed the site, and listened while Lauren described the demolition as lawful emergency abatement. She handed him the forged county order. I showed him the email from David Monroe confirming that no demolition permit had been issued. Michael read both documents slowly. This needs a criminal investigation, he said. She destroyed my house. I understand. Then arrest her. His jaw tightened. I can open reports for criminal trespass, property destruction, suspected forgery, and assault against Mr. Price, but I cannot prove intent at the roadside. Lauren folded her arms. Her expression told me she had expected that answer. The demolition foreman refused to speak without an attorney. His workers shut down the equipment and avoided my eyes. One climbed into a truck marked Holloway Site Services. Grant's last name. The connection was no longer hidden. Michael ordered everyone off the property and warned them not to remove another piece of debris. Lauren smiled politely. Then she handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was an invoice for $97,000. Demolition labor, hazardous material disposal, emergency enforcement fees. A second page claimed the HOA would record a lien against my land if I failed to pay within 30 days. At the bottom was a site plan showing a private boulevard crossing the empty foundation and bending around the protected wetland. They had destroyed my home. Now they planned to use the debt to take the land beneath it. I spent the night in a motel 6 miles away because I had nowhere else to sleep. The room smelled like bleach, stale smoke, and damp carpet. At sunrise, Samuel knocked. He held a mud-covered trail camera in both hands. "They smashed the visible cameras," he said. "But they never found this one." The casing was cracked. The memory card was still inside. For the first time since I saw the rubble, my hands stopped shaking. Lauren had taken my house. But she had left me the witness. The trail camera sat on the motel desk between a paper cup of cold coffee and Lauren's $97,000 invoice. Mud had dried around the battery cover. One corner of the casing was split where something heavy had struck it, but the memory card looked untouched. I slid it into my laptop. For 4 seconds, the folder appeared empty. Then the files loaded. The first images were ordinary. Deer crossing the driveway before dawn. Samuel collecting my mail. Rain darkening the red clay. Lauren's Escalade moving slowly along the county road 2 nights before the demolition. Then I opened the 7th morning. At 6:19, 2 black security vehicles entered through my broken gate. At 6:27, Grant Holloway arrived in a silver pickup. At 6:34, Lauren stepped onto my property wearing the white HOA hard hat. Behind her came 3 excavators, 2 dumpsters, and a flatbed carrying orange barricades marked with a counterfeit county seal. The camera captured 1 image every 15 seconds. Workers cutting the gate chain. Grant unfolding a site plan across his hood. Samuel standing in front of the first excavator. 2 guards dragging him toward the ditch. Lauren pointing directly at the workshop. Then I found the video clips. The audio was rough, filled with wind, diesel, and the metallic clatter of equipment, but their voices came through clearly. The demolition foreman stood beside Lauren, holding the forged order. "This permit number isn't clearing," he said. "The county database is delayed," Lauren answered. "I need utility confirmation before we touch the structure." Grant handed him another document. "Gas, water, and electrical have all been cleared." I paused the video. They had not. The power company later confirmed my service was still active that morning. The foreman looked toward the house. "The owner contacted every contractor in the county." Grant stepped closer. "Holloway Site Services is not every contractor." That explained why they came. Grant owned the company. Lauren had not hired an independent demolition crew. She had brought her partner's business onto my land using forged utility releases and a fake emergency order. The foreman still hesitated. Then Lauren lowered her voice. "The development agreement closes Friday. If that house is standing when Mitchell returns, we lose $80 million. My fingers went cold. Grant glanced toward the workshop. "What about the safe?" "Get it outside first," Lauren said. "The original deed and wetland maps are inside." The next clip showed workers cutting 1 hinge from Dad's safe. When they failed to open it, Lauren ordered them to drag it into the yard. Then the excavator bucket tore through the workshop roof. I watched the footage twice. On the 3rd viewing, I noticed the logo printed on Grant's folder. Whitaker Holloway Development Group. I searched the Georgia Corporate Registry. The company had been formed 6 months earlier. Lauren owned 40%. Grant controlled the rest. Its only listed project was the 64-home expansion behind Brookstone Hills. The access parcel matched my legal description. They had promised the developer a road across land they did not own. I copied the recordings to 3 drives, uploaded another set to encrypted storage, and sent everything to Deputy Torres and David Monroe. Then Samuel gave me the name of an attorney, Megan Parker. Her office sat above an old pharmacy downtown and smelled like printer ink, leather, and strong coffee. She watched every clip without interrupting. When Lauren said, "Get the safe outside first," Megan froze the screen. "How much can you afford for a retainer?" she asked. "Almost nothing." She studied the forged permit, the fake utility releases, the development filing, and the lien threat. Then she closed my laptop. "I'll take it on contingency." "Why?" Megan tapped Lauren's signature. "Because this stopped being an HOA dispute the moment they forged government records." She looked at the frozen image of the excavator beside my father's workshop. "They thought demolition would remove the obstacle." A small smile crossed her face. "Instead, they recorded the conspiracy from beginning to end." Megan did not begin with a press conference or an angry letter. She began with silence. For 6 days, she organized every photograph, recording, permit, invoice, and county email into a timeline precise enough to account for every 15 seconds of the demolition. Then she filed the lawsuit: fraud, civil conspiracy, criminal trespass, conversion, forgery, destruction of evidence, attempted fraudulent lien, punitive damages. The courthouse clerk stamped each copy with a mechanical thud that sounded heavier than it should have. That same afternoon, Megan secured a temporary restraining order preventing Lauren, Grant, the HOA, and Holloway Site Services from entering my property or removing anything from the debris. A forensic team arrived before sunrise the next morning. They photographed excavator tracks, cut locks, severed utility lines, and the blackened steel safe resting near the broken foundation. The safe door had not failed during demolition. Someone had attacked it with a cutting torch. Heat scars surrounded the hinge. Fresh pry marks crossed the locking plate. Inside were the original deed, my father's wetland surveys, annexation refusals, and correspondence proving Brookstone had no authority over the parcel. The documents survived. The fireproof lining had done exactly what Dad paid for. Megan ran one gloved finger across the scorched door. "They tried to destroy the papers that proved they were trespassing," she said. "After the case was opened, subpoenas went to Brookstone Hills, Whitaker Holloway Development Group, Holloway Site Services, the private security company, and every board member named in the emergency minutes. The HOA delivered 6 boxes of landscaping contracts, pool receipts, and complaints about trash cans. Megan called it camouflage. Her paralegal found the first real email buried inside a server backup. Ryan rejected the final offer. Begin the structural process. A second message followed. Once demolition costs attached to the parcel, he will have no practical choice but to sell. The emergency meeting had never happened. 1 board member had resigned months earlier. 2 were in France on the date of the supposed vote. The 4th admitted Lauren had sent only a signature page and described it as approval for routine drainage maintenance. Then Holloway Site Services began to fracture. Its insurer denied coverage after discovering the forged permit and false utility releases. The demolition foreman arrived at Megan's office with an attorney, a phone, and the expression of a man who had finally calculated the price of loyalty. He produced text messages showing Grant had promised triple payment if the house came down before Friday. He also brought a voicemail. Lauren's voice filled the conference room. "Take the safe first. The deed and wetland maps cannot be there when the developer inspects the site." Nobody spoke when the recording ended. Megan placed the surviving deed beside the development agreement. Lauren and Grant had promised legal road access across my property 6 months before the demolition. The contract included a $3 million completion bonus if the route was cleared on time. My home had not been declared dangerous. It had been assigned a deadline. Process servers reached Lauren at the HOA office, Grant at a private club, and every board member before sunset. At 7:14 that evening, my phone rang from a blocked number. I answered. Lauren breathed into the silence. Then she said, "Ryan, tell your attorney to stop before this destroys the entire community." I looked at Dad's scorched safe standing inside Megan's evidence room. "You already tried destroying my community," I said. "The difference is, mine kept the receipts." Lauren offered me $800,000 before discovery ended. She called it compensation. Megan called it evidence of fear. The settlement required me to surrender the property, destroy every copy of the trail camera footage, withdraw the criminal complaints, and sign a statement claiming the demolition resulted from a clerical misunderstanding. I read the final paragraph twice. Then I pushed the papers back across Megan's desk. My father's house was not a clerical error. Lauren increased the offer to $1 million. I refused again. The trial began 11 months after the excavator entered my property. By then, Brookstone homeowners knew their dues had financed forged permits, private security, and a development company controlled by their HOA president. The courtroom filled before sunrise. Some residents wore suits. Others came directly from construction sites, hospitals, and night shifts. The room smelled like polished wood, old carpet, and coffee burned down to tar. Lauren sat between three attorneys in a dark navy suit. Grant sat at another table and stared at his hands. Megan opened with a photograph of my house taken the morning before I left for Chicago. Then she placed an image of the empty foundation beside it. "This case," she said, "is what happens when private ambition disguises itself as public authority." David Monroe testified that the county had never condemned my home, issued a demolition permit, or authorized Brookstone Hills to act. 2 board members confirmed their signatures had been forged. Samuel described being thrown beside the ditch while Lauren ordered workers toward the workshop. Then the demolition foreman took the stand. He admitted Grant offered triple payment and supplied forged utility clearances. He also confirmed Lauren ordered the safe removed before the first wall came down. Megan played the voicemail. The deed and wetland maps cannot be there when the developer inspects the site. Lauren's voice filled the courtroom. Her attorney claimed she meant copies. Megan opened Dad's scorched safe and lifted out the original deed in a clear evidence sleeve. Then she played the trail camera footage. Diesel engines roared through the speakers. Lauren appeared beside the excavator, pointing toward my home. "The development agreement closes Friday. If that house is standing when Mitchell returns, we lose $80 million. Nobody moved. Even the judge stopped writing. The final blow came from Grant. His attorney had negotiated a cooperation agreement weeks earlier. On the 4th morning of trial, Grant walked to the witness stand carrying bank records and internal contracts. He testified that Lauren created the fake structural process, forged the emergency vote, and planned to use demolition debt to force me into selling. An email appeared on the courtroom monitor. Once demolition costs attach to the parcel, he will have no practical choice. Lauren testified on the 6th day. Megan handed her the $97,000 invoice. "You charged Mr. Mitchell for destroying his own home? It was a lawful emergency expense. Authorized by whom? The board." Megan displayed the forged signatures. Lauren's fingers tightened around the witness rail. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. They awarded me $2 million for the house, personal property, and destroyed records. Then they added $8 million in punitive damages. The judge entered the $10 million judgment that afternoon. He looked directly at Lauren. "You did not protect this community," he said. "You exploited its trust for private profit." The gavel struck once. It was quieter than the excavator, but it destroyed everything Lauren believed made her untouchable. $10 million sounded enormous until I stood on the empty foundation and realized none of it could purchase one ordinary Saturday in my father's workshop. Money could replace lumber, could replace windows, tools, furniture, and every appliance Lauren's contractors hauled away. It could not replace the cedar dust trapped in Dad's jacket or the pencil marks he left beside the workshop door as I grew. The photographs recovered from the safe were smoke-stained and curled at the edges. Some faces remained clear. Others had faded beneath heat, water, and hydraulic oil. I kept every one. Lauren resigned as HOA president the morning after the verdict. She did not leave quietly. Her attorneys challenged the punitive damages, the trail camera footage, and Grant's testimony. After reviewing the evidence, the judge upheld the judgment. State investigators referred the forged permits, false board records, fraudulent lien attempt, and destruction of evidence to prosecutors. Lauren was charged with fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and evidence tampering. Grant's cooperation reduced his eventual sentence. It did not save Whitaker Holloway Development Group. The company collapsed within weeks. The $80 million project died with it. Brookstone homeowners discovered that their dues had paid for Lauren's lawyers, private security, and part of the operation used to destroy my house. At the next election, every board member connected to her was removed. Samuel became HOA president. He complained about it for 4 days before accepting. That was exactly why people trusted him. Megan structured the recovery carefully. The HOA's insurer covered the negligence claims. Holloway Site Services paid through a separate settlement. The remaining damages came from Lauren's development shares, investment accounts, and the court-ordered sale of her vacation property. I used part of the judgment to rebuild. The new house followed the original footprint, but every structural detail was stronger. Reinforced foundation, steel roof connections, fire-resistant siding, storm-rated windows. The workshop returned to the exact place where Dad had built it. I restored the steel safe and placed it beside the new workbench. The scorched paint remained. So did the cut hinge. Some evidence should never look new. Above the bench, I rehung my first approved blueprint. The frame was repaired. The glass stayed cracked. The county permanently blocked any development road across my parcel. The orange survey paint slowly disappeared beneath rain, weeds, and red Georgia clay. Lauren's shortcut became 6 acres she could never touch again. On the first morning after construction ended, Samuel joined me on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. He stopped beside the new sign at the driveway, private property, paid for by the HOA. He laughed until coffee spilled across his shirt. Cars slowed to read it. Neighbors waved. Nobody crossed the gate without permission. The dogwood trees my mother planted survived the demolition. Their roots had grown deeper than the excavator bucket could reach. That spring, both trees bloomed. I stood beneath them while a hammer struck inside the workshop. For 1 second, it sounded like Dad working again. Lauren believed destroying the house would erase my ownership, bury the evidence, and force me to surrender the land. She misunderstood what my family had built. A house is timber, stone, glass, and steel. A home is proof that someone stayed long enough to leave roots behind. They demolished mine while I was gone. I rebuilt it while they watched. And every evening, when the sunset catches the crack across Dad's blueprint and the scorched steel of his safe, I remember the lesson Lauren paid $10 million to learn. Justice is not loud. It is patient, keeps records, and when the time comes, it signs the judgment.